Hey everyone, this is Mike. I want to show you really quick how I use elements to set up layouts so I can use GeneratePress with GenerateBlocks. I use GenerateBlocks on my pages now and usually on the homepage hero. And I'll show you how I use the elements to set up the various page headers for the pages that don't use the blocks. And it might give you a better idea of how you can set up all your customizer settings and your GenerateBlocks container padding so that everything lines up on desktop and mobile and it all looks the same. All right, so I have this new site that I'm starting, service, and I figured I kind of stripped down certain parts of it, and I figured this is a good place to stop and make this video because it kind of shows the way I use blocks and elements without getting into too much detail. So this is the home page, and you'll see here this homepage header is done in GenerateBlocks. Basically, this is one big GenerateBlocks container that's merged to the top and sitting behind your logo and your navigation. And then the styles page is using a regular header element where this is the H1 using the post title tag. And then the blog is the same. And then I created another header element for all my blog posts that also has the meta information. And then what I did is I built the actual blog post using blocks. That way I can get the columns and have a little more control over the design. All right, so first I'll jump into the customizer and show you how I set everything up so that everything looks even as far as alignment and different devices. So my container width is set to the default 1200. The separating space, it doesn't apply because I'm using one container. And the difference basically, if you've used this, is separate containers treats the content on the page. Like if I clicked on the blog, the one container padding is basically controlling everything around the entire page content, and the separate containers is going to cause stuff in the sidebar to be separate as far as what's over here in the body. So if you notice now I can control the separating space, and now it's affecting because it's set to separate containers. But I'll go back to one container. I found most of the time it worked because I usually work on white backgrounds most of the time. Separate containers might be good if you're using a colored background with different colored sections around your content, and you can kind of create more of like a grid type look. I have the container set to text for that same reason, because this text here, I want it to align with everything on the left edge of the site. And let me jump to a page where I could show that. So you'll see here, and I'll grab, you probably heard me, I always use these Mac stickies just because they help you to quickly see if stuff align, and they stay on top of your browser, which is cool, and you can see through them. So I've got everything aligned here. If I were to set this to the box instead of text, basically the content here, whatever your padding is, it's going to push it in. So if I had a color background, I could have it aligned to this edge, and then the text would be inset a little bit. So if you choose box, you'll notice that, and let me just jump and refresh that. You notice that everything comes in a little bit. That's because now there's a little bit of space around this photo and this, and if I did have a background color, you would see it. So basically your body color would show around the image and this text. But since I don't, and it's just white, then I'm going to set it back to text. All right, so my content padding I've set to 100 pixels on the top and bottom and 20 on the sides. And I keep that the same for mobile as well, just because I like to have a kind of a consistent padding and white space throughout the site. Now, because I have this set to 120, 120, I'm wanting to do the same thing basically on any of the pages I use the blocks on. So if I went back to the styles page, which is built with the blocks, hang on, my internet just lagged. There we go. All right, click edit page. Now you notice I'm using the header element so that basically this is being controlled through elements, and then everything with the blocks basically starts with this here. So if I go here, let me get rid of that, and I click on that outermost container controlling all this page content, and I click on the spacing, I have it set to 120, 120 as well. And this is so that any pages I build with GenerateBlocks are going to basically be, the title is going to sit in the same spot, and it's going to have the same spacing as the pages that are built with GeneratePress. And then tablet and mobile I leave empty, and basically so that these values will trickle down. And I'll have consistent padding on both block pages and regular GeneratePress pages. All right, so if I go back to the customizer, okay, so if you notice here, I have the home page, which is a GenerateBlocks container merged to the top. And then on the other pages, I have a regular GeneratePress header. As far as spacing, when I go into my elements, this is where I'm going to show you how to kind of, how you can kind of align everything no matter what you're using. Okay, so here's my home page element. And all this is basically a home page header that I've set as the front page location only. So this is only going to affect the home page. And what this does by adding this blank comment here, it's basically going to, that blank comment along with merging the header and displaying it only on the front page is allowing me to use GenerateBlocks as my hero that goes all the way to the top of the browser. So it's going to go all the way to the top, sit behind your navigation, sit behind your logo. This is what you would kind of also want to do if you're building a landing page and you just wanted to build the whole thing with GenerateBlocks. You could just do this. It's kind of what you used to do with page builders. If you wanted to use a page builder for your entire page, you would set it up this way as well. So you need this empty HTML comment here or it won't work. So you could write whatever you want in there. It doesn't matter. So I've got that set to the front page. I've got the header set to merge. And like I said, that allows me to build out my hero section in GenerateBlocks. Now when I go back to my elements, that's going to be my home header. I have two more headers. I have a header that's basically going to be global for every page on the site, except for that front page, and except for the post, because I built a separate page header here for just post. So basically there's three page headers. There's the home page, which is basically making it empty, and then the blog posts have their own header, and basically that's going to be the same as the page headers, but I also added the meta information here. And you'll notice my page headers and blog post headers, I have this CSS class, and all that is I made this gradient using the container gradient in GenerateBlocks, and I wanted the same gradient on all the pages. So I just recreated it with CSS and assigned it that class so that all the other headers have it as well. And then the site header is set to merge. And then this one is for the blog post, so it's set to post, all post. All right, so if you look here as far as spacing, to get all these headers up behind the navigation, you have to merge, or you're going to end up with the page header sitting below your header where your navigation and logo are. Now I have this set to 110 on both devices, and the way I got that 110 is I basically took the top and bottom header padding along with the height of my primary navigation, and that equals 110. So if I'm in the layout section, I click on the header, I have 40 pixels on top and bottom, which is here and here, and that's 80. And then when I go back to my primary navigation on desktop, it's set to 30. So basically I add that up and I get 110. And that's how you figure out your offset site header height. So I've got that set, and it's identical on the blog post header and on the global page headers, which is just the post title, same exact setup. I have the same padding. I have the same 110. And the reason I set this padding to 60 pixels on top, and that's on both mobile and desktop, is because that 110 pixels here, and then this top padding of 60 makes 170. Okay, when I go back to the site, basically when I click on this first hero section, my top padding is 170. Okay, so I built this originally, and then what I wanted was, I wanted not only the hero, but all the pages. I wanted all the headlines to basically start or sit at the same spot. So you'll notice the blog post, the page headers, my hero section, all the text is kind of right there. So that's how I ended up with 170, because this has 170 pixels, and then the two headers have 110 offsite plus the 60 pixel padding. So you can mess with that as far as getting everything to align between any pages you built the header with GenerateBlocks, and then also the GeneratePress header elements. That's how you kind of get everything to align. And that'll basically go across through mobile as well, because I left those container padding settings at 100 pixels on desktop and mobile. So if you go through the site, you're going to notice that all the headlines basically are going to sit in the same spot. And that's how you can kind of get consistent padding using between the GeneratePress pages and the GenerateBlocks pages. All right, so those are my three headers that I set up: the home page, the post, and then the global pages. And you'll notice I set the global pages to be everywhere, which is entire site, minus the front page and minus the post, because post has its own header and the front page is using the GenerateBlocks right here, the home page header. Now you'll notice I have two layout elements. This first one is going to simply be my blog post width. So the only thing I'm setting is I'm setting the content to 800 pixels wide, and I'm displaying it on all the posts. And the reason I did that is I like the articles to be basically 800 pixels wide, because if you've ever seen an article that's the full width, it's hard to read, so I kind of narrow it down, and I set that there. Now this article, this page header here, this is my header element for the post that has the meta, and then the actual article is done using blocks. So when I click to the outermost container, actually on this one I showed, this is a good example of when you wouldn't use a container. Basically my first block is going to be a headline. So I'm not wrapping these. And if you saw the other video I did, I usually wrap everything in a container to have more control over the top and bottom padding. But a post is probably one of the scenarios where I realized you don't need it, because you're always going to start off your post usually with a headline, and you can control obviously the top padding on that. And then because I'm using that 800 pixel element, I don't have to worry about controlling the width using a container block. So basically I'm controlling the width with an element, and then I'm just adding blocks. So here's a header block, paragraph, and then I added a grid here to get these two photos. And the reason I added a grid is because obviously I needed two columns, and the reason I put the grid in a container, which is here, is so that I could add some top and bottom padding above and below the photos. Because when I went from paragraph to grid, the photos were kind of close to what's above and below it. So by putting the grid in a container, it allows you to go ahead and add a little bit of padding on the top and bottom to give a little breathing room between your photos and the text. So then I have another GenerateBlocks header, I have a Gutenberg paragraph, and then another image down here. So building out your post in GenerateBlocks is it's actually a lot better, a lot easier than using the classic editor or anything like that, because obviously you can do columns and you can get a lot more. If you've used the Gutenberg for your post, they have that spacer block, which is how you get some, so you don't have to use the spacer block anymore. If you ever want to use space, just wrap whatever you want to have some space in a container, and then you can just add some top and bottom padding that way. All right, so that's my blog post width element. The other layout element is basically for every page that I'm going to use GenerateBlocks on, because when you're using GenerateBlocks, usually you're going to want to add like a full width row or a full width background photo. And so basically I assign that to all of the pages. So if I click on full width, I don't have any of these set, except I'm changing this to full width. That allows me to run a photo the full width of the browser, like if I had a background photo across a row, or even just a color, like a full width color. And the display rules are going to be basically all the pages. And if you're not super familiar with elements, all pages doesn't mean every page on your site. All pages means actual pages. So everything on your site would be entire site. Like when I used entire site earlier, that would be every page on your site. Pages, posts, archives. All pages is basically, just keep in mind, it's just your pages. So as I'm building pages with GenerateBlocks, every page I build would basically get this full width layout. And then I also added the front page because that's separate from pages. They treat the front page as its own kind of entity. So I've got that set. So basically on the front page, and then any page I add, it's going to be full width, which is going to allow me to basically, like this hero. So here's the home page. This is using that layout element, and you'll notice I have the photo the full width of the browser. So that's how you're going to get that. So this home page is one container up here controlling everything that's in this little hero section. I've got a headline. It's using the highlight option to where I can get that like one colored word. And then it's got another headline below that. And then I've got the button, which is using both buttons in that button container. And obviously you can make them different. And then below that I have another container here. So basically this is my separate container. And what I did is I added a little bit of negative margin to this container to pull it up on top of that first container. And then I just rounded the corners a little bit, 12 pixels on the top, left and right. And then I use CSS to give it a little drop shadow around the container, just to give it a little, instead of it just going from white to white right here, you get a little bit of shadow there, so it kind of gives it a little more better overlay effect. And then obviously I've got a little 2-column grid here for this content that I added. And I'm going to continue building out this page with some other containers and blocks that I have saved to build out the rest of this little services demo. So that basically, I hope that helped. I think once you, all right, say you were building a website that was gigantic, 100 pages. That's where I would highly suggest that you're going to have a global page header, because if you don't set a global page header, you're going to have to create a GenerateBlocks header on every page of your site. So if you think about like archives, like if you were on the blog and you clicked on like here, like my name, and it went to my archive of all the articles I've written. If you don't have a global element header, this is just going to basically be blank. So you got to think of it that way. You got to think about the pages that you really don't ever touch, like archives, even categories. Like here's another archive page. If you didn't set up a global header, all of those pages that you don't really think about, even like your 404 page, it's not going to have a header. So that's why I did entire site. So basically any page that I don't manually want to affect the header, it'll apply this header to that page. So I don't have to worry about it. All the archive pages, everything. And that's why I'm excluding the post and the front page. All right, so I hope that gave you a better idea of how you can kind of use elements to get your little, kind of get like a template going to get GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks pages, especially responsive wise, to get everything looking cohesive. That way, if you go to one page and then you go to like a page built with GenerateBlocks, you know, the header's not up here, or this one's looks completely different. That's how I kind of get everything to look like it was all done using the same method. All right, if you have any questions, feel free, ask below. And if you want to subscribe, go for it. I'm going to start doing a bunch of kind of short on-the-fly GenerateBlocks videos, like how to build stuff. Super specific kind of short videos, like I might just build like a pricing table on the fly, or I might build a landing page on the fly, stuff like that, just so you can kind of see a little bit more how GenerateBlocks works live, kind of in a production environment. All right, thanks for watching, and have a great day.